Rain lashed against the airport windows like a warning from the sky itself, but inside the bustling terminal, no one noticed the storm brewing in human form. Captain Amara Washington stood quietly by the front desk of Gate C-12, her navy blue pilot uniform soaked from the sudden downpour outside. She held her flight bag in one hand, cap under her arm, credentials neatly clipped to her blazer. She waited patiently for acknowledgement. Instead, the gate agent looked up, did a double take, and then said words that would change everything. Passengers aren't allowed here. Please wait outside until boarding starts. There was no hint of recognition in the agent's eyes, no respect, no welcome, just the patronizing tone of someone who had already made up their mind. "I'm not a passenger," Amara said evenly, her voice calm but tight. "I'm the captain of this flight." The silence that followed felt like it cracked the floor beneath them. The gate agent blinked, flustered. "You're what?" Amara stepped forward, pulled out her credentials and held them up. "Captain Amara Washington, Flight 394 to Denver." But it was too late. The humiliation had already taken root. Passengers nearby had overheard. A few glanced up from their phones, eyes darting between Amara and the young white gate agent who was now stammering apologies. The damage was done, not just to her dignity, but to something deeper. A line had been crossed that had been walked over too many times before. This wasn't new for Amara. She had spent her entire life fighting to be seen. Born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, Amara had always looked to the skies. While other kids played house or dreamed of becoming pop stars, Amara built cardboard cockpits and begged her father to drive her to the airport so she could watch the planes take off. Her mother, a nurse, worked double shifts to pay for flying lessons when Amara was just 16. At 22, Amara became one of the youngest black female pilots in the country, and the only one in her flight school. The whispers came early. She must have gotten a scholarship because of her skin color. "You sure you're in the right building? Sweetheart, isn't this program pretty intense for someone like you?" But Amara never answered with anger. She answered with action. She studied harder, flew longer, trained smarter. She earned every single stripe stitched to her sleeves. Back in the present, Amara walked through the jet bridge without saying another word to the agent. Her co-pilot, Jeremy, was already in the cockpit. He gave her a tight nod as she entered, but one look at her face and he knew. They did it again, didn't they? She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The flight went on as scheduled, but inside, something had shifted. It wasn't just the gate agent's disrespect. It was the snide comments from flight school, the security checks where she was randomly selected more than anyone else, the passengers who'd asked to speak to, the real pilot. The manager who once asked her to smile more, as if her skills weren't enough without charm. Amara had spent her entire career surviving these moments. But she hadn't come this far just to survive anymore. Two days later, Amara filed a formal complaint with the airline's HR department. She didn't stop there. She posted a video on her social media not out of rage but resolve. In it, she didn't name the gate agent but described the incident in detail. She spoke calmly with grace, telling her story of how difficult it was to constantly prove her worth in a profession she had sacrificed everything for. The video went viral within hours. Thousands of black pilots, flight attendants, engineers, and aviation students began sharing their own stories. Passengers, too, started chiming in. The pressure on the airline grew like a rising tide. Then came the moment no one expected. A former flight attendant who had worked with the same airline came forward with screenshots and documentation. Evidence of a company-wide internal chat where employees mocked Amara's video, calling her too sensitive and just another diversity hire who got lucky. Even worse, executives had allegedly joked about quietly reassigning her to avoid more public backlash. The story exploded across national news. The airline's CEO was forced to make a public statement, but by then it was too late. A congressional inquiry began. Federal aviation authorities launched an investigation into the company's diversity and inclusion practices. More whistleblowers came forward. Stock prices dropped, sponsors pulled out, and in the middle of it all stood Amara, not broken but brighter than ever. The airline was forced to restructure. Within 6 months, several top executives resigned or were removed. Mandatory anti-discrimination training was instituted across every department. A new independent board was created to oversee ethical operations and fair hiring practices. But perhaps the biggest shift came when Amara herself declined their offer to become the new face of the airline's diversity initiative. Instead, she started her own YNGS Academy, launched just 9 months after that rainy morning at Gate C-12, a nonprofit aviation program aimed at providing scholarships, mentorship, and flight training to underrepresented youth across the country. Within the first year, they had over 5,000 applicants, most of them young women and people of color who had never seen someone like Amara in the captain's seat before. Amara began touring schools, giving speeches, sitting on panels, and becoming a symbol not just of resilience but revolution. She made it clear this wasn't just about race or gender. It was about fairness, access, and the right for anyone with a dream and the discipline to achieve it. 2 years later, Amara stood once again in an airport terminal, this time at her own academy's recruitment booth. A young black girl approached her, wide-eyed, clutching a notebook filled with hand-drawn airplanes. "Are you really a pilot?" the girl asked. Amara smiled, kneeling to her level. "Not just a pilot," she said softly. "I was once just like you, and now I help others fly." The girl grinned. "Can I be a pilot too?" Amara looked around the terminal, the same kind of place that once tried to push her aside, and then back at the girl. "You already are," she said. "You just haven't taken off yet." Amara hadn't planned on becoming a symbol. She had only wanted to fly. After her video went viral, she found herself in front of cameras more than cockpits. News networks called day and night. Talk shows sent invitations. Everyone wanted her opinion, her story, her face. Some even offered her sponsorship deals to appear in commercials or diversity campaigns. But none of that felt right. She didn't want to be paraded around like a trophy to patch over a broken system. She wanted change. Real, lasting, unapologetic change. What angered her most wasn't just the gate agent's ignorance. It was how normal it had felt. How she had almost let it slide, the way she had so many times before. How years of swallowing mistreatment had conditioned her to just move on, to just prove herself again and again and again. Not this time. Behind the scenes, Amara assembled a small team of legal advisors and aviation professionals who believed in her cause. They began gathering testimonies from employees across the country. Pilots, mechanics, flight attendants, baggage handlers. Many of them had stories that never made headlines, stories of being passed over, silenced, or labeled difficult simply for asking to be treated with respect. It wasn't just about race either. It was about class, culture, gender, and power. One mechanic from Florida confessed he had been demoted after reporting racist slurs in his crew. A flight attendant shared her experience of being stalked by a senior pilot, only to be told by HR that she was exaggerating. The system had protected itself at all costs, and for years no one dared to challenge it. But Amara had opened the floodgates. Meanwhile, the airline tried to save face. They issued a public apology, reshuffled a few executives, and posted glossy photos of smiling employees on their website. They launched a campaign called Wings of Unity. But inside, employees whispered about how nothing had changed. In some cases, things had gotten worse. Quiet retaliation, closed doors, surveillance. That's when Amara made her boldest move yet. She filed a federal civil rights lawsuit, not just against the gate agent, but against the entire airline, for systemic discrimination, retaliation, and failure to create a safe and inclusive work environment. Her legal team had gathered over 600 pages of internal documents, emails, recordings, and whistleblower accounts. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. The case went public and quickly became one of the most high-profile legal battles in modern aviation history. News anchors debated it. Politicians commented on it. Civil rights leaders rallied behind it. And the public chose her. Thousands began boycotting the airline. Influencers amplified her message. Former employees created an online movement called Fly with Dignity. Within weeks, sponsors withdrew. A major travel website dropped the airline from its recommended list. Airlines that once competed with them began poaching their most talented staff. The pressure broke the dam. An emergency board meeting was called. The CEO resigned. New leadership was brought in, not from the top of the old system, but from the ground up. Former employees with real vision, compassion, and integrity were invited back. This time, they weren't token faces in campaigns. They were in charge. In a shocking twist, the airline issued a public settlement to Amara and all employees affected by the toxic culture. Overheaters $75 million in total compensation and a full admission of wrongdoing. But Amara didn't take the money for herself. She donated every dollar to her new venture, the Wings Initiative. The Wings Initiative was bigger than her first academy. It was a national coalition of aviation schools, youth programs, mentorship networks, and legal support for underrepresented workers. It offered scholarships to low-income kids who had never even been on a plane before. It connected retired pilots with students. It trained future aviation leaders, not just to fly planes, but to lead companies, shape policy, and build new skies. 5 years later, Amara stood on the stage of a packed auditorium at the first Wings Summit in Washington, D.C. Hundreds of students, employees, lawmakers, and aviation pioneers sat before her. Her hair was streaked with silver now, her uniform replaced with a sleek black blazer embroidered with the Wings Initiative logo. She looked calm, strong, whole. She began her speech with the words, "I was told to wait outside, so I built my own door." The crowd erupted. She spoke not about revenge but resilience. Not about hate but hope. She reminded them that real change doesn't happen overnight. It happens when enough people decide that silence is no longer an option. It happens when someone stands up and says, "This isn't right," and another person joins them, and another, until the voices become too loud to ignore. Epilogue. At a small regional airport in Alabama, a 9-year-old boy named Elijah looked up at the sky with his mother. A commercial airliner passed overhead, and he turned to her with wonder in his eyes. 1.